Well, I want to take advantage of this excellent edition of the Tempest and do something I haven't really done forever, and that is lean on a text for an essay, because this has a lot of really good guidance here, and I don't think I can improve on it that much, but I want you to use it in a way that's a little bit different than what they have in mind here. So first of all, obviously I want to congratulate everybody for going through the play. I've read I don't know how many hundreds of responses, and I've seen some really thoughtful, and almost everybody, if not everybody, does some really excellent work, really thoughtful work on the Tempest. I see a lot of careful reading people are getting into, and really understanding the Shakespeare play, and that takes a lot of effort. And so I want to commend everybody for taking the time and listening, and then oftentimes really enjoying it as well. And so what I want you to do, this is on page 92 inside the PDF, 93 being the next page. And if you look at the, whatever the, this tally is, it's page 110. I don't know what to call that, but anyway, one of them's in text, page 92. The other one is, I just say the PDF numbering system, not the text numbering system. I don't know if I'm referring to that correctly. Nonetheless, so the way they frame this, analyzing Shakespeare's view of nature and civilization, almost as if you were going to use Montaigne's essay and look at these 7 bullet points and then use each bullet point to anchor a paragraph. Now, that could be a 25-page essay, and we're looking at 5 or 6 pages. We're looking at 3 or 4 really good ideas, supported by the text, developed with critical thinking, and bracketed by an introduction that sets up the discussion and a conclusion that wraps it up. So we don't have to write about so much. And, you know, this would be more like a graduate level essay going 20 or more pages. However, what this is good for, and what I want you to use this for, is to brainstorm. And that'll be the first assignment due Tuesday, is what are the topic or topics you want to write about? You might take one and go into depth with it, or you might take a couple and mix them up a little bit. And that's the brainstorming I'd like you to do. It probably could take you a couple of hours to think your way through it. You know, is Caliban an example of an idealized natural person uncorrupted by the vices of civilization? Well, obviously, he's not an idealized anything in the way we see him. And if he's corrupted by the vices of civilization, I mean, he's certainly not uncorrupted. For God's sakes, he wants to kill. He tried raping. I don't know why they asked that question, but other than to get you thinking. What is Caliban? Is he naturally or that way, or his head be? And what is his reaction to civilization? Civilization for Caliban means Prospero and Miranda. When I think of that, and this is what I'd like you to do, or they ask, how has he become corrupted by civilization? Or isn't his inherent nature treacherous and brutal? I want you to keep in mind, what comes to mind for me anyway, is Caliban says, basically, I'm paraphrasing, the only good your language has taught me is it's taught me how to swear. And when I think of that a little bit, I realize he learned every curse word from Prospero, because he did not have a stitch of Prospero's language when Prospero and Miranda washed ashore. And so obviously, he curses, he can be brutal, he can be foul, he can be mean, but obviously he learned that being cursed at and probably punished by Prospero. So you have to, it's a good question. Is that the way he was? Or is he kind of the end result of Prospero's foul temper? Because it is Prospero who taught him how to curse. He did not, according to the story, know a single word of Prospero's language. In fact, I think it's Miranda who says he kind of babbled, I'm paraphrasing again, it's Act 1, Scene 2, incoherently. That'd be a good starting point. And so he was this sort of blank slate, and Prospero and Miranda filled him up with a lot of things, and not all of them are sweet. I don't think they, taught him how to rate. That certainly came out of his bones, but a lot of the nastiness in Caliban, obviously, is a result of the way he was raised, and it may be he's so impossible that they had to be harsh with him just to keep him in line. There are people who are very, very, very difficult. Anyway, worth thinking about. So that's a good talking point. And even though they say use each talking point for a paragraph, that one is good for an essay. This next one, and Miranda and Caliban, I love this idea. What were their reactions to the civilized world similar? That would be a cool thing, because Miranda, when she first meets Ferdinand, and then when she meets everybody, especially in Act 5, she thinks people are so magical. And look at Caliban when he meets Stefano and Trinculo, his gods. Now, granted, he's liquored sideways, so what he sees, he regrets in the end, wondering how he could have trailed after such drunkards. But again, they're both in a state of amazement, Miranda that is, and Caliban, when they see their first people from the civilized world. So it's really cool, and this would be well worth developing in an essay. What ways were their reactions different? Given their upbringings, why did they turn out so differently? This is all really good. And so if you were to take, as you walk through these there's 7 of them, these talking points, and just kind of go through the essay. Find one you really like that rings bells for you, and then you go through the essay and find the scenes and the actions and the things people say that bring these themes to life. It's really cool. I like this one here, and maybe I'm not interpreting it the way they're intending, but it's one of the things that echoes through the play. What does he reveal about Renaissance attitudes towards native members of a natural society, that is, towards indigenous people? And you can see that. You can see Stefano and Trinculo are thinking of, God, if they could just, put Prospero in a cage and show him back home, they could make lots of money. So they exploit, and people did that with Indians, or I should say native peoples. They would take them back home to England or France or Italy and put them on show. Not in cages, but certainly they were great curiosities. So this is kind of fascinating too. And then also there are just attitudes of he's not quite human, not quite monster. What is he? Certainly that was part of the time. And you'll see some of that if you read the Montaigne essay. And then when they talk about Renaissance attitudes towards disadvantaged members of their own society, that could be Stefano and Trinculo. They're the kind of stand-ins for lower class. And they certainly are held with contempt. They're definitely dumb all over, and kind of slovenly, and their manners are horrible. What their values are twisted. Everything is kind of vulgar. And so it could be they are stand-in for what, quote unquote, the lower orders, the common people, were looked upon as during the Renaissance period. So this would really work well. It's a good critical thinking one. And then again, I love this one here. It's kind of like Lord of the Flies in a sense, where you give these people this clean slate. In the Lord of the Flies, it's the kids, but here you give these adults this clean slate of an island. What do they make of it reveals their very nature, because there are no civilizing influences surrounding them, like rails in a bumper car area just to keep you in line. And so this is fascinating. What happens when civilization disappears and people are left to their own devices? We know what happens with Stefano and Trinculo and Caliban. We know what happens with Antonio and Sebastian, but we also know what happens by counterexample with Gonzalo, the dreamer, and we also know by counterexample with Prospero, the great creative genius. And he had the power, by the way, to kill everybody. And nobody would have known a word. But instead, in the end, Act 5, he seeks redemption. So he kind of represents the higher Christian sensibility of forgiving people and hopefully bringing them around to their better natures. Whether or not it works is, of course, another thing. But that's what he's trying to do. And so this is a fascinating one here. And especially what the actions of civilized people reveal about them. And again, I like the context, because Gonzalo was saying, if I were king, if I had power, I'm going to make a paradise. And Antonio and Sebastian are going to get their power through murder, as were Stefano Trinculo and Caliban. And Prospero, who has more power than anybody and could have pretty much left them all dead at any time, becomes a very forgiving, turn the other cheek Christian who hopes he can bring them back to their better nature. So this is really fascinating. I love that one. And this is kind of a corollary. So I think it means the same thing as the last one, at least the way I talked about it. And this one here is kind of the same. But it's worth noting, and it's worth noting because Antonio and Sebastian and Gonzalo are looking at the same thing, and it does sort of project their inner nature. That was a question we had a few weeks ago. So that might be worth looking at as well. I don't know if it's quite enough, but I think it's an interesting angle to look at. This one here, I don't know what they mean of the difference between art and civilization. They certainly have distinctions between language well used and scornfully used, but keep in mind the scornful language of Sebastian and Antonio, that comes from their natures. Every bad word Caliban learned, he learned from Prospero, maybe a few from Miranda. So I'm never quite sure what's going on, but I do know what people say reveals who they are. And so what is their, how do they reveal their characters through what they say might be a little bit, in my mind, a better way of framing that question. I like this. It takes a while to get around to it, that the difference between art and creative works and the empty works of courtly egoism and political maneuvering. It's basically the difference between Prospero and what he's hoping to do, because what he really has done is Prospero has become a playwright. Everybody is, what do I want to say? Everybody's like a puppet, and he holds the strings. And so that's what he's doing, is he's trying to bring about some kind of reconciliation, bring everybody back to their true selves through repentance and self-awareness. And that's what you'd hope art and creative works would reveal, the better nature. But then look at this courtly egoism and political maneuvering. That is Alonso, Antonio, and Sebastian, and to some extent Stefano and Trinculo. That doesn't bring out what's best in people. And along with that, which characters represent positive aspects of civilization and which represent the negative aspects. So if you can walk through those talking points and land on one or maybe two that work for an essay, and then brainstorm what scenes, actions, and words you would use to support these questions, that would be great between now and Tuesday. And I hope this helps you get some direction for the paper. There's so many different things to write about. You don't have to write about all of them. Just find one of those 7 that, or a mix that really work for you. Don't want to be too narrow on this, okay? Another thing would be analyzing Caliban's character. A lot of good questions here. That's a good narrow focus, and that's the key to any good essay, is a good narrow focus. And I'm going to leave this one out because it would take too long for me to sort of unpack and say what I think they're saying with that. You're welcome to look at it And then finally, Miranda and Prospero's relationship. I hope this helps you, and brainstorm between now and Tuesday. I'll have the assignment up shortly.